Hey, look at that. We are live. Welcome, everyone. If you're joining us on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes. If you're here live, well, you're just stuck with me as I try to untangle my headphones. I don't even know if you're hearing me because I can't hear me. So that's the thing. I'm looking at my VU meters that you can't see where you are, but I can see them, and things seem to be okay. But one never knows. It could be an awful screeching noise, and I'd have no idea. All right, I think I've got this straightened out. Thanks for joining us for the Network Plus study group, which starts in 8 minutes and 30 seconds. In my time, anyway. Your time is a little different. There's about a 15 to 20 second delay on your side because of the way that YouTube does the streaming. It's like magic. Okay, what do we need? We need, when do we need it? What do we need? Keynote. When do we need it? Now. There we go. That works fine. How about a camera check, everybody? Hi. How you doing? Good to see you. We got this, we got that. Yeah, everything's fine. It's alive. Oh, we need to change the website. I knew there was something I needed to do. And turn on some air conditioning because I just closed the door so you would not hear noises from the outside. Although it's not so bad outside. How is it outside right now? We'll have to look in a moment. We'll go to the bird feeder. Let's go to our settings. I've also got a vocal zone that I'm trying to get rid of, so I apologize for my smacking. My Network Plus study group is right now. ! Click here to join us. To join us, and it should be /live. Reset the cookie. Save the changes. And what else? What else? That's pretty good. Let's see how things are going on the bird feeder. At birdfeeder.live. This is my backyard. Not a lot of action. A little overcast today, as you can see. You can barely read it. Mostly cloudy. Oh, there it goes. 69 degrees Fahrenheit. 20.6 C. I don't know what the C's about, but, there you go. That's what the C's about. Yeah, not much going on there. Plenty of food. Where are you guys? Maybe there's a hawk around. They're watching out for that. I need to move the bird feeder that's behind this. It's like sticking up a pole right in the middle of my line of sight there. I didn't realize it was there. I thought it was somewhere else. I may be imagining things, which would not be surprising, would it? Okay. Air conditioning. Set it to that. And what else? It's very nice. It sounds like they've got something going on. They're doing construction. They must have a machine happening. All right, we can at least turn that off so it's not humming in our ear. What else do we need to set up? Is YouTube working? Let's see. YouTube is working. Hello, people. The tweet is about to go out. Where's my Twitter? Let's get out of this here and find the tweeter. Twitter? Hello, Twitter. Let's look at the Twitter for this. And my Twitter says that should have gone out. Should have been there already. But I don't see it. What's happening? Hot stuff. There it is. There's the tweet. Okay, things are good. We can close that back up again because you can't be productive if Twitter's there looking at me. What else do we have to do? I think recording. We need to record it. I could probably do my podcast voiceover now and not have to do it later. Yes, Socrative is open. I need to search for podcast. This is the Network Plus study group on March the 8th. This is for the podcast. I'll talk more about this in a moment. Put it in front of me so you can hear me. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer Network Plus study group. This study group was recorded on March the 8th, 2017. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer Network Plus study group after show. This study group was recorded on March the 8th, 2017. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. Well, that was gripping, wasn't it? Yes, I received back my matrix switch. Dead. Dead on arrival, nothing they could do, no resuscitation. So the screen here, black. The screen here, black. The screen here, black. All the other things that I normally connect to throughout the week that I normally switch between, black. So that's a bit of a thing. All right, we can close out the audio intro stuff. What kind of audio rig am I using? Well, I'm using a PR40, Heil PR40 microphone to do this. And my mixer is an Axia mixer. It's an IP mixer. Everything is put into IP. It's a Linux box, effectively. This big thing that you see all the lights flashing on to my left that I'm pointing at right now is a Linux-based mixer. And it's really great. It's completely programmable. I could run it from my computer screen if I wanted to. I like having the console there. But that's what is doing the mixing. There's also some audio processing being done through a separate thing there as well. So there you go. Yeah, I now have to get another matrix switch. So I either need to buy an older used matrix switch, or I need to get a different matrix switch. I need to get a different kind of brand new one. Do I think the new CIA WikiLeaks will change things for cybersecurity? It already is. It already is. It already has. Why wait for a company to have 0 days fixed? We'll just stick the vulnerabilities out there, and now everybody has to scramble to get patches out. Not exactly how I'm sure these manufacturers and these companies would like to do things, but there you go. Okay. We're just about ready. And when you consider they've only released 1% of what they have, this could be pretty interesting. We need to go back. Back. That looks good. This looks good. This did I get graphics in here? Yes, it's got the wrong graphic. Dang it. Gosh darny. Let's see if I can fix this real quick. Super fast, because it's time to get started, everybody. Let's get started already. Let's change this to be Network Plus. We need the right graphic image. Did I do a screen grab earlier? I think I did. Let's see if I did. Did I? Yes, I did. There you go. And it's done. See how fast that is? That's fantastic. All right. Let's get rid of that thing. And let's get this going, shall we? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2017 Network Plus Study Group from Professor Messer. I'm your host, James Messer, and through this next hour or so, I'm going to be asking you questions, and you're going to be hopefully giving me the answers to some Network Plus content, hopefully something that can help you study in your preparation for the CompTIA Network Plus exam. I usually, in the second hour, will open up phone lines. It's our after show, we like to call it, and we can really talk about anything. It could be Network Plus, it can be other certifications, it can be what I've been doing this past week, it could be lots of things. So we've already had a few things in the chat room, people talking about things that are in the news technology-wise. Maybe we'll talk about some of those things as well. One never knows. You're going to be able to answer the questions that I ask interactively online. I'll show you in just a moment how you can make that happen. It becomes very useful to have that there. So let's also have a look at why you're here. I'm able to do these live study groups thanks to your support. This is something that a lot of you will watch all of my videos online, because every single one of my training videos for Network Plus and all of the other courses that I create, every minute of every video is online for you to watch for free. Anybody can watch. They're all available and out there. Some people like to have offline versions, though. And if you're one of those people that doesn't have a high-speed internet connection, or you're on a plane and you need to travel and you don't want to have to deal with a network connection, you can purchase an offline version of the course. You can find out about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Not only includes the 1080p full HD video, it includes audio versions in MP3 format for this. So if you're in your car, you just want to listen to audio, it's a good way to do it. Includes my course notes, so they're bundled in with this. You get that for free, and everything is all bundled together in one flash drive that I send to you. A nice 8 gig flash drive, because I've got to send you a lot of content. You also have immediate availability to download this as well. So the second you purchase this, you could download it all if you wanted to from my website. So that's kind of nice to have that there. If you want to know more about that, it's at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Would not be able to do this without your support. There is a lot of free content on my site, not just videos. I also have a number of questions available. There's about 200 pop quiz questions available in these 20 question sample tests on my website right now. A lot of people don't even know they're there. I mentioned it the other day, and people had no idea that 200 Network Plus questions are there. This is really an archive from previous study groups. These are questions that I've written. I make sure they're up to date with the latest version of the Network Plus exam, and I put them out there for that piece of it. There's plenty to see there on these questions, and maybe it's something that can help you too as you study for the exam, and absolutely free. All available at professormesser.com/popquiz. Speaking of absolutely free things, an audio version of this live event is available as a podcast. So you can, of course, go to professormesser.com/podcasts, and you'll be able to find my A+ study group, my Network Plus study group, and my Security Plus study group, all available in podcast form. So if you're someone who likes to subscribe to a podcast, have those podcasts downloaded automatically, you can have the audio version of this available. There's also an audio version available of this. If you go to that page, you can click on it. It will stream it immediately from there as well. So that's nice to have. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can answer the questions that I ask, and here's how you do it. You want to pop open a new browser window and go to a website, Socrative.com, Socrative, Socrative.com. And when you get there, you would click the student login, because you're the student. Don't click the teacher login, that's mine. Click the student login, and you want to go to a room called Professor Messer. Make sure you spell it right, or you're not going to see the question. So there's a question waiting for you right now. If you type everything properly, you will see a question waiting for you. And the room name, Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. Make sure you spell it right. It's all one word, all lowercase. I think you'll get there. There are also apps available for Socrative. If you're an app person, you like to have it on your mobile device, and you can have your mobile device running with another screen that's in front of you. You simply go to your favorite, where you get an app from, the Google Play, the Apple iTunes, the Windows Store, and you can download the Socrative Student app. And you can, of course, put in the right room name there. If you do put in all of this information properly, here's what you get. Here's the question that's up. Not really a Network Plus question to start off, but this is a sample question to see if you know what the actual answer of this might be. It's a good test to see, are you in the right room? And then we ask something that's not really network related. Maybe you happen to know what this happens to be. These are the odd things that me and my family talk about when we sit around the table and eat dinner every night. And one of my sons is really into solar system and looking at the planets and looking at the moon. So he tells me things that I don't know. Here's one of the things that I didn't know. So maybe you don't know. And we'll be able to ask and answer this. What's the largest moon in our solar system? And if you are in Socrative, you will see this list here. You'll see what the largest moon happens to be. I can make this a little bit bigger on my side. Here we go. So what is the largest moon in our solar system? The one around the Earth, which we just call the moon. Doesn't really have a name. We should name it. It's just the moon. We have Pluto, we have Ganymede, we have Io, and we have Titan. Which one of these would be the largest moon in our solar system? And you can see as you answer, I can see exactly how we're doing. 50% of folks have said Titan. We've got a tie for second, really. The one around the Earth, Pluto, and Io, and then 18%. I guess that would be second. It's a tie for third. Second place is Ganymede at 17%. So this is one of those things where, see, don't Google. This is not what you want to do. Pretend you're sitting down for the exam and you can just take a stab at it. This is one where, interestingly enough, the moon that has the largest in our solar system is Ganymede. There's a picture of Ganymede right there. It's one that goes around Jupiter, which Jupiter, indeed, the largest planet in our solar system. So of the largest planet and the largest moon, we have Ganymede. So if you answered, we take a look at this, you answered C, Ganymede, the 19% of you got that one absolutely right. See, it's a trick question because I put Titan, which sounds enormous. It's Titan. How can Titan not be the largest moon? And yet, there we go. Pluto, of course, is a planet, or isn't, depending on who you talk to, I guess. The one around the Earth, the moon, our moon around the planet Earth is not anywhere close to being the largest one in our solar system. So I find that interesting. Okay, going forward, all of the rest of these are going to be Network Plus questions. And the Network Plus exam is one that's been out since February the 28th, 2015. So we're a couple years into this. We still have probably another year before they even think of providing an update to this exam. And of course, it doesn't matter if you have the certification, it doesn't matter what version of the exam you take, you get the Network Plus certification. The Network Plus certification itself doesn't have a version number, only the exams have version numbers. So we are probably looking about this time next year before we even see a new version of the exam being released. And even then, there's an overlap period, generally from 4 to 6 months, that CompTIA will provide. So well into 2018, you'll still be able to take this version of the Network Plus exam. The point here is do not wait to get certified. In fact, never wait to get certified. Check and make sure that the exam is not going to be retired tomorrow or next week, of course. But if it's anywhere into the future like it is here, then you should, of course, take this exam. There's so many upsides to getting certified. There's really no downside for being certified. Never, never, never wait to be certified. It's pretty important. Let's do some Network Plus questions. Let's jump into this. I've got some Q&A. I like to start off these events these days with a performance-based question. As many of you know, on the Network Plus exam, you may not get multiple choice at the beginning. You're probably going to get a number of questions that might be fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. You may be placed at a command line and asked to type things in. In this particular case, the question I have here is one where we have to put things in an order. In this case, it's one from the highest to the lowest. The question is, put these OSI layers in order from layer 7 to layer 1. And then I've given you a list of all of the OSI layers. So don't put this in the chat room. Do not answer any of these questions today in the chat room, which, by the way, is on professormesser.com/live. If you are watching this live, if you're on YouTube, you'll notice there's no chat on YouTube. It's all on professormesser.com/live. There is a live event chat. That's the one I'm looking at on my screen. So don't answer in that chat. You want to put these in order and put them just, and a matter of fact, I didn't give you an A, B, C, D, or E. You have to fill in the blank with this one. So you have to put in what is, and notice I say which order from layer 7 to layer 1. Make sure you put them all on the correct way. The OSI layer is, of course, something we need to know for the CompTIA Network Plus certification. It's an important piece. In fact, that's where we first see it. We don't see it in the A Plus. We see it in the Network Plus. We see a little bit of it in Security Plus. You're going to see it if you go into anything dealing with security. You will talk about the OSI model all the time. Something that's very common in the networking industry and in the security industry to talk about all of these different concepts of where things fit into the OSI model. This is one that becomes pretty useful whenever you're trying to describe where things are happening. If you're trying to describe, oh, it's routing or it's switching or it's doing something more at an application layer, you need to be able to do that. Yes, people in the chat room going, well, you gave us the names. You actually wrote out half of this, and I kind of did. I went back and forth over, do I just ask you to give me the layers and then you have to make it up, or do we make it more of a matching thing or a putting them in order thing? And I thought a putting them in order thing would be pretty good. Maybe I should have put something in there that wasn't an OSI layer. That would have thrown everyone off. That would have been bad for everyone, I think. If I'm looking at the results that are coming through, some of you are in here and thinking about where these are. I see these popping up on my screen as you're putting them in, and most of you doing really, really, really well with this one. I think the OSI model being one of those things that we just have to memorize is an important thing. But of course, if you use it all the time, it's not even memorization to be able to do that. The OSI model, pretty straightforward. Here is the list of effectively the answer to this question. Here's the OSI model listed from layer 7 at the top and layer 1 at the bottom. This is one where it becomes pretty interesting to do this. Whenever I start working through all of the things that you would ever possibly need to know, this is one of the most important ones because you're going to use it all the time. The very top layer, we call it, of the OSI model is layer 7. It's the application layer. It's the one we think about when we go to a website and we see things pop open on our screen where our eyeballs are seeing that content. That's a layer 7 application layer. We deal with those. Going down from there, layer 6 presentation. Layer 5 is the session layer. Layer 4 we spend a lot of time on with Network Plus because that's where our TCP and UDP ports are. That's an important one to think about. The layer 3, our IP address, is another important place and a very well-used place in the Network Plus certification. We have to know a lot about layer 3. We have to know a lot about IP addresses. We have to be able to subnet. We have to be able to understand subnet masks. All of those things are happening there at layer 3. We also have to know a lot about layer 2. That's where switching takes place. That's where we have MAC addresses and that layer 2 communication occurs. We talk about that data link layer, that's where it is. And lastly, layer 1 is the physical layer, which some people think of being the cable. It's really more of what's running over the cable or over the fiber, but the same idea applies. It's something physical. We can almost touch it if we wanted to. This becomes pretty useful to have that there. And if you know as they're saying in the chat room, if you know the mnemonic, it really does help a lot to be able to do that. My mnemonic I always used was all people seem to need data processing. Although the term data processing kind of played out, kind of old at this point. There's many other ways to not throw sausage pizza away. It's from the bottom up. So it's one of those that you get the idea of what you are accustomed to using as a mnemonic. It can help you out if you get any questions about the OSI model. And after a while, it just becomes normal being able to use the OSI model in that way. You know where the layers are. You don't use a mnemonic anymore. You understand exactly where things are matching up. So if you answered application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical, you got that one absolutely right. So not bad for a good start with the performance-based questions. Maybe your performance-based question on the exam will be just as easy as that. Hopefully it will be for you. Let's do some multiple choice questions. Let's jump to another one. This question is more about, well, an injector. The question is, in which of these would you be most likely to use an injector on your Ethernet network? Maybe you already have an injector on your Ethernet network. Maybe you don't, and you're trying to figure out where you would put one. Don't Google an injector on your Ethernet network. You want to take a stab at this. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, maybe that's what you want to do. Don't answer in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to Socrative.com because I have some options for you. And the options are, you want to connect voice over IP phones. You want to scan for malicious network traffic. You want to filter traffic based on a URL category. You need to connect a serial WAN link, or you want to run a vulnerability scan. One of those things would be the best way, Whoops, I hit the wrong button there. Let's go previous. Here we go. Which one of those would you be most likely to use an injector on your Ethernet network? I'm sorry, things on your screen are now flipping around. I apologize for that. Hopefully, maybe one of you have used an injector before. You don't have to worry about trying to figure out where you're going to get an injector from. You've already used it. You know exactly why you connected it to your network. And in fact, on the Network Plus certification, the exam objectives specifically talk about injectors. So make sure that you understand these as well. It comes in very handy if you need one. I have one on my network. Oh, is that a hint? I guess it is. Not really. It doesn't help very much at all. My network's crazy. This is part of my network. You don't even see the parts that are the 19-inch racks to the left and right of me, and then there's a completely different full-size 19-inch rack in the other room. So maybe I'm not the best choice to give hints about that one. Let's see how we did with this one. I've got a few of you that have answered the question. Others of you, by the way, are Googling. I know. I understand what's going on there with those pieces and getting that to have happen on there. So I wonder sometimes exactly what's going on with those pieces. Let's see how we did. Here we are. Well, we're sort of torn. We're a little bit torn back and forth. So what would it be? Well, let's see. Top of the line, maybe tied for first, maybe the first and last options. So we have connect voice over IP phones and run a vulnerability scan, or almost neck and neck, maybe 1 and 2. Then at 18%, maybe a tie for second would be scan for malicious network traffic and connect a serial WAN link. And then 8% says filter traffic based on a URL category. So there is your choices where we didn't really get a majority on that one. So maybe we should talk about what an injector really is. Well, on my network, here's my injector. This is it right here. This is an injector that I have on my network. Can I zoom up on this? I will zoom up on it. Here we go. So in my network, I have this powered device, and on one of these, I'm plugging in the data from my switch. The switch that I have is one that doesn't provide enough power for the device that's on the other end of this connection. So the device on the other end is the one that is the power over Ethernet, the PoE. It's the one where the data, it's actually powering a camera, a security camera. And although I have a switch that supports power over Ethernet, this camera needs more watts. It needs more power. So in my particular case, I'm using this injector to take an existing Ethernet connection and inject some power into it. That's what you would use for a power over Ethernet connection. So you've got, it could be one wire used for data and one wire used for electricity, or very commonly, we put both the data and the electricity over the same wires for it to work. This is commonly used for these devices that you don't want to use one of those wall warts, those external power adapters, or even plug it into a power source at all. You'd really just plug in an Ethernet connection and it's powered. It's perfect that way. In fact, if you look at, we were looking earlier in the pre-show about my bird feeder, birdfeeder.live. That bird feeder camera is all powered through a single Ethernet connection. Fortunately, it doesn't need an injector to be able to do that because I'm providing the power directly from my switch. But if your switch doesn't support power over Ethernet, or it doesn't have enough power to support the device that's at the other end, you'll probably need an injector to make that happen. If you have it a built-in power provided at the switch, usually you refer to that as an in-span. That's where the power is coming from. If you do have an inline power injector like this, you're providing the power in the middle, so it's a mid-span. You may hear those terms being used for those. And there's two modes that you would use to provide power over Ethernet. You need to look at the devices that you are using and find out what power mode it's using. Power mode A puts the power on the same pairs as the data. Nice that it does that, kind of a phantom voltage for those of you familiar with the concept of phantom voltage. And then power mode B is you have completely separate wires that are inside of that Ethernet connection. Maybe you're using 100 megabits, so you have the other wires available to use for the actual power. So it's very useful to have. In the chat room, people are even asking, so what layer is this happening on? Well, it's a layer 1 device. You want to look at it that way. We're simply taking and providing input. We're adding some additional power to that particular line. This is definitely a physical connection, an OSI physical layer 1 device and the way that it operates. So if we look at our answers with this, connecting IP phones was the one that 34% of you answered. Not a majority, but certainly the most, and that's the one that is correct. If you're connecting a voice over IP phone and you don't want to plug it into a power connection, you want to have an injector, or you want to have a switch that already supports this power over Ethernet connection. Becomes useful there. Scanning for malicious network traffic is not what we would use an injector for. Filtering traffic, an injector doesn't filter any traffic based on anything. It doesn't even know about the traffic that's going by. It doesn't connect a serial WAN link, and it doesn't run a vulnerability scan. It's clearly for power over Ethernet, so connected voice over IP phones would be our best answer, really our only answer for this particular question. So hopefully those 34% of you, good job on knowing what an injector is, but never look at a question you got wrong as being a bad thing, especially in a study group. Now you know what an injector is. And if you ever get this question during an exam, you know to look for the power over Ethernet devices for that type of thing. Let's go to another question. You probably saw this one flash by as I was clicking things on my screen. The question is, which of these would be the best way to prevent session hijacking? A session hijack. First, you have to know what a session hijack is, and then you have to know how to apply it, because I've given you some scenarios here. What would be the best way to prevent a session hijacking? Would it be to use a strong password, to implement multi-factor authentication, to maintain a current antivirus database, to use end-to-end encryption, or to modify the server's default ports? Which one of these would be the best way to prevent session hijacking? Now, if you know the answer to this, you can answer it on Socrative.com. Go to Socrative.com to the student login and go to Room Professor Messer. All this information also available on ProfessorMesser.com/live. You're trying to figure out, how do I get there? How do I answer these? Everything is on that screen at ProfessorMesser.com/live. So which of these would be the best way to prevent session hijacking? Maybe you know. Stop Googling it. You want to be able to, well, maybe I know. I did these questions almost a week ago. So I'm looking through these answers and saying, what would be the best way to prevent session hijacking? All of these, of course, security answers to be able to figure this out. These are questions where you really do need to know and understand session hijacking and how it operates to be able to apply one of these fixes to it. That can be something you want to do pretty importantly as well. So let's see how we did with our session hijacking. Let's click our button. 79% of you feel pretty strongly about this. Definitely a majority say use end-to-end encryption. But 17% of you, maybe you're smarter than this. Maybe you've decided, no, you should implement multi-factor authentication. That is what we should do to prevent session hijacking. And then hardly anyone said to use a strong password. Hardly anyone said to maintain a current antivirus update. And only 3% of you said to modify the server's default ports. So what would it be to prevent any type of session hijacking or sidejacking, as they say? The way this, in a very basic way, this is one way that session hijacking can work. There's many ways to implement and have this happen, but we'll look at this at a very high level. You have two devices talking to each other. You have what we're calling the victim. Someone, maybe it's you, it's somebody unknowingly is going to have their session hijacked. They just don't know it yet. And they're communicating to a web server. They're communicating to Facebook. Good example of this. There was a very common Facebook session hijacking utility available until Facebook did something to prevent it. We'll talk about that in a moment. So we're going back and forth. When you log into these devices, they commonly will send you a session ID so that you don't have to constantly give your username and password every time you send communication. If you're in Facebook and surfing around, can you imagine having to re-authenticate every time you clicked on something? Instead of having to re-authenticate, they give you a session ID and you send that session ID and it checks and makes sure that, okay, you've got the session ID. It's some big long string. Nobody's going to duplicate it. Nobody's going to randomize that and be able to match it from what you know. It's something that's very unique. And as long as you're logged in, that session ID should work just fine. So that's working great, except there may be a bad guy listening in. And if he grabs that session ID communication, he can then use that session ID to communicate with Facebook or the server or whatever it might happen to be. And now he's able to pretend that he's you. He doesn't have to use your username, doesn't have to use your password, doesn't even need to know those things. So very useful to be able to do that. So the session ID that they've now gotten and own effectively means that they're you. They've cloned you as far as that server is concerned. That's definitely a concern, isn't it? That's a big problem to be able to do that. Well, how can you prevent these types of things from happening. Easiest way, best way, most common way, encrypt it end to end. If the bad guy can't see the session ID, they can't hijack it. They can't grab it. They can't use it because they never saw it to begin with. And very commonly, when we're on a public Wi-Fi, a public hotspot, you're in a coffee shop, you're in an airport, you want to use end-to-end encryption. At a very minimum, every server you communicate should be over HTTPS. That's something that Facebook, for instance, implemented right after the big problems that were occurring with session hijacking on Facebook, is they just made it so that everybody connecting to Facebook would always use HTTPS. They weren't providing pages over HTTP any longer. Makes it very easy. There were some add-ons and are some add-ons you can have for your browser that will check to see if a website supports HTTPS and automatically use that even if you typed in HTTP. So it automatically encrypts all that communication. So it makes it very easy. Encrypting to the maybe through over VPN is another good example of this, so that at least you can encrypt from your machine out to somewhere else on the internet. And as long as that is encrypted wherever the bad guy is, in the coffee shop, for example, you're effectively doing the same thing. You're encrypting and making that information private. And then, of course, there's other session ID monitors. You can see if anybody's using your session ID in your area. Some of these are almost outdated now that we're doing so much more HTTPS, but those types of things are still out there to be able to use. So let's see how we did then. Those 77% of you that said use end-to-end encryption, yeah, you got that one absolutely right. That's exactly what you should do, is use end-to-end encryption to make that happen. 18% implement multi-factor authentication. Well, the communication that occurs when the bad guy gets your session ID have occurred after the authentication process is complete. So you could have the strongest password. You could have many factors of authentication. You're using your fingerprint. You're using a token that's generated. You're getting an SMS. You are using maybe another biometric. You're using your iris. You're authenticating to the machine. You've got a smart card authentication, and it won't stop the guy from hijacking you, because after the authentication is where you would receive the session ID. And as long as they can grab that session ID, then they're able to make that happen. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge to have that happen. There's obviously a lot you need to know on the Network Plus certification. So many different topics, so many different challenges with this piece. End-to-end encryption, for example, good example, the VPN for end-to-end encryption, that's another good one for that. All of that's in my videos. Now, obviously, there's a lot of videos in Network Plus. Hundreds of videos are out there with a huge number of topics. Now, you can, of course, go through every video and write your own notes, and I recommend that you do. But a lot of you don't have the ability to do this. You don't have the time to go through every video, or maybe you're just not a great note taker. Well, that's okay. I've already got notes available for you. These are my Network Plus course notes. Everything that you would ever need from my videos is in these course notes. I've made sure of it. I put everything in here, from subnetting to protocols to cabling to fiber to encryption, proxies, topologies, everything. What I've did was go through every single video, grab all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the tables, all of the charts, all of the diagrams that I create, and I put them into these course notes. Here's what they look like. Here's the course notes that are on my screen right now. So I'm able to see there's VPN communication, the DHCP, DNS, proxy details, the tables and charts about wide area networks, all the images that you would ever need, they're in the course notes. So this is one that also, by the way, everything that you would spend on these $10 course notes goes back to keeping the website running. So a lot of you have said, I want to support your site, but I don't take donations. I want to give you something for the money that you're spending. And this is one way to do that. Maybe this can help you with your studies. It doesn't replace a book. It doesn't replace the videos. But if you just need something that summarizes everything for you on one screen or one document that you could use, this might work for you. You can find out more about the Network Plus course notes at professormesser.com/NPCN, Network Plus course notes. That's what that stands for. And of course, on my website, if you go to the Network Plus page, they're also there. You can find them, and hopefully it can help you study for your Network Plus and pass that Network Plus certification exam. Let's get back to our questions. Got some other things here as well. We've got Which of these, here's the question. I should flip on my side so you can see it change on your side. Maybe I can make this one harder than the last one. Which of these would be the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm? Which would be the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm? Good question. Good question. A broadcast storm is something you definitely need to be aware of. It's something that can be a significant problem on the network. We always think about it from a network administrator perspective of minimizing the number of broadcasts, but how would you troubleshoot that? How would you know that you had a large number of broadcasts on your network? Would you enable RSTP? Would you run a vulnerability scan? Would you perform a packet capture? Would you encrypt all traffic with an IPsec VPN? Or would you check all router and switch logs? Which one of these would be the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm? How would you do that? Well, one of those is definitely the right answer. And that's one of the things you'll notice with these questions is they use certain terms. This is a really good example of one. Which of these would be the best way? They put it right there in the question, the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm. Often on the exam, you might see answers, multiple answers that could be correct. There could be 2 or 3 answers that technically could be a way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm. But that wasn't the question. The question is which of these would be the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm? This is one of those where you do have to know about broadcast storms, and hopefully if you've had to troubleshoot some, this should really help you because you'll know the best way to do it. Usually the best way is going to jump right out at you. There's not really going to be a question about what the best way happens to be. So maybe you know what it happens to be. If you think you know, don't answer in the chat room. Go to Socrative.com to the student login and go to the room Professor Messer. Now, obviously, if you're watching this on a replay, you won't be able to go to Socrative.com. You're sitting there wondering, why are the questions not coming up in Socrative? You have to be here live to be able to see these pop up on your screen. If you want to know when the next live event is, you can go to professormesser.com/calendar and look at our live event calendar. Try to do this every week. We usually have an A+, a Network Plus, a Security Plus study group every month. So the next week or so, you'll probably have one coming up. This month, I think I have 2 Wednesdays at the end of the month. I have 2 weeks off. I love those kinds of months when I have a little extra week to be able to do that. Let's see what this answer was on the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm. 42% of you said perform a packet capture. Not quite half, but we're pretty close to that. 30%, number 2, the second highest, would be to enable RSTP. And 24% of you said to check all router and switch logs. Hardly anybody said to run a vulnerability scan. Hardly anybody said to encrypt all traffic with an IPsec VPN. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge in being able to use that. Which one of these could it possibly be then? How would we troubleshoot a broadcast storm? The easiest way, the best way, and really the only practical way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm is with a packet capture. This is the best way to do it. You plug into the network. In fact, it's so easy to look at broadcasts on a network because they're sent to every single interface on a VLAN. So if you're on a local network, it makes it very easy. You plug in, you don't even have to redirect traffic using a span or a port mirror. You simply plug in your protocol analyzer, maybe even use the one that your system is connected to, your computer. Just pull it up on your computer, capture all broadcasts. You will see exactly what broadcasts are coming through because it will list them all. The problem is there may be a lot of them you don't even recognize. What in the world would this do with this? The broadcasting is a little bit more of a challenge. How could there... What are all of these different broadcasts? Well, you may have to just do some work with that. You may have to figure all of those pieces out. Maybe some broadcasts you can get rid of. Maybe some broadcasts you can't. And if your network is just getting too big with too many devices and there's too many broadcasts, maybe we want to split the network into smaller pieces. Create another VLAN, route between these other VLANs. That may be a very good way to consider when we decide to break the network up into smaller pieces. That's why a lot of people will tell you we like to have our network, each subnet, each VLAN, to be maybe a smaller number, less than 100, less than 50, less than 30. It depends on your network and the different protocols that you use to be able to do that. So if we look at our possible answers, if you answered, 42% of you said perform a packet capture. If you answered C, you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Enabling RSTP. the rapid spanning tree protocol. Spanning tree protocol, something you should be using anyway on your switch network, but that's designed to prevent loops on your network, not broadcast storms. Broadcast storms are a normal part, or broadcasts themselves are a normal part of network communication. Broadcast storms are not something you need to have normal on your network, but broadcasts are just the way the network operates. IPv4 uses broadcasts extensively to communicate back and forth. They're going to be on your network. You will never be rid of broadcasts on your IPv4 networks. RSTP, even if it's enabled and turned on and working, isn't going to stop broadcasts. Those still have to traverse your network to be able to properly make sure everything's operating. Maybe it's a routing update. Maybe it's an application that needs to communicate to other devices through a broadcast. You have to always have those available. Checking all router and switch logs. The logs generally won't tell you how many broadcasts are occurring on your network. There are ways on routers and switches and other network devices to turn on packet capturing. In fact, one of the switches and routers that I have is packet capture functionality. You can turn on a debug mode, for example, and look at the packets going by. So it might be able to help you troubleshoot. I don't usually recommend performing a packet capture from a router or switch. They don't tend to do packet captures very well. But if you have nothing else, that sometimes can be a last-ditch effort, but definitely not the best way to troubleshoot a broadcast storm given the number of options that are here. Running a vulnerability scan, that doesn't help you at all for identifying broadcasts, and encrypting all traffic with an IPsec VPN would simply encrypt the broadcasts. Wouldn't really help that piece either. Broadcast storms become a little bit more of a challenge when you're dealing with that. So if you did answer, 42% of you answered perform a packet capture, then you got that one absolutely right. If you already have your Network Plus certification, one of the things you know is that you have to renew it from time to time. A number of you will simply take a higher level certification to renew, but others are collecting continuing education unit credits. If you're someone who needs a continuing education unit credit for this webinar event, you need to perform these particular functions. Make sure you listen carefully for this. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. Click that Contact Us link and make sure you put into that link that you have watched this study group. It is the March 2017 study group for Network Plus. Make sure you put your name in. Make sure you put the email address in, or I won't be able to get this back to you. And make sure you put the special code word of the month in somewhere in the message to me that says broadcast storm. These are messages that I process myself manually. So you can put anything in the message, just somewhere in there. You need to mention that this is for CEU credit and the word is broadcast storm. It helps me find exactly what month you're dealing with, because you could be watching this on a replay. Whether you're watching on replay or watching live, you can send me this request for a CEU and I will respond back with that response. But you have to follow that process. If you don't follow that process, I will not send you a CEU. And I'll send it with a digital signature so you know it came from me. You'll know that nothing else was changed in that. It's something that I like to provide just because you watched, and some of you need that CEU. So something you can use to get something out of this that you watched today. Hopefully that can help you as well. Let's do another question. I have one here that is, this is an interesting one because you have an image daily double, a picture daily double. And here is the question. There it is, a little bit better to see it here. Which of these network types would be most associated with this cable connector? Which one of these network types? And I have a list of these available for you. So hopefully you know this cable connector. And here's the cable connector, by the way. There it is, big picture of it. You can also click on your Socrative app or on the Socrative screen. It should make it larger for you to see as well for those pieces. But which one of these would be the way to use this? Well, I've got which one of these network types would be most associated with this cable connector? Would it be a T3? Would it be a gigabit Ethernet? Would it be a T1? Would it be a cable modem? Would it be DSL? Which one would be most associated with this cable connector? I think many of you have used this cable connector before. Maybe you know, and if you know, you can go to Socrative.com and you can, of course, choose the option there to be able to see what it might be. Maybe you do know what it might be. I'm going to take a sneak peek and see how you guys are doing with this one. This is a very common connector too, but just because it's common isn't something that means we don't need to know it for our Network Plus certification. So I think a number of you know this one. If you know the answer, you can go to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer. I think a lot of you knew that one right off the bat. Let's see how we did with this answer. And indeed, I like to have at least one gimme during the week. I think this is the one. 96% of you said cable modem. 3% said DSL. And 1% said T1. Nobody said T3, interestingly enough. Thought a lot of people at least say T3. And then 0% said gigabit Ethernet. So that's one of the challenges we have here, is knowing all these different cable types. Very useful to know what that happens to be. Maybe also, if you ever have worked with a cable modem, you know this. There are places, though, in the country, around the world, that don't have cable modems. So it's not exactly as much of a giveaway or a gimme question as I might make it think that it should be, because there are cases where it would not be. The cable type here, obviously an F connector on the end of a coax connection. The coax here are very common. That combination, they are very commonly used for cable modems. Absolutely. This is commonly what we'd have our television would come over this. So our television, our data connections, and of course these cable providers, at least in the United States and elsewhere, are even sending phone communication over this. So our voice telephone communication is over this. It's as if we were on an Ethernet. We're plugging in and using this coax. Obviously, the mechanics are very different on a coax network than it is on an Ethernet. That's how we're commonly connecting, is with a cable modem, something we need to know for our Network Plus certification. Would not be a T3, although a T3 does use coax commonly. It usually has a B and C connector at the end, not an F connector, like we see here in this image. Gigabit Ethernet commonly provided over an RJ45 or over a fiber connection, usually RJ45, the most common one. A T1, so T1s are usually provided over also an RJ45, really it's an RJ48C or an RJ48S, but looks very similar to the connector you might use on an Ethernet connection. And then we've got DSL. DSL is provided over phone lines. So if you have the older traditional phone lines coming into your house from the plain old telephone service, the POTS lines that you're plugging in your normal analog telephones to, that's also sending data. And it sends data over the DSL connections. So we'd probably see an RJ11 connector there if we were sending this over a DSL connection. So it's another one of those things that we can think about being able to do that. And in fact, the 93% of you that answered cable modem obviously got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. One of the things that is a little bit of a challenge with the Network Plus exam is there's so much to know. And a lot of the things that we do, and I mentioned this in my first question about the OSI model, if you use the OSI model, it's easy to remember that. Somebody asked me about port numbers earlier this week. How do I memorize all these different port numbers? Well, you use them. And as you use them, it becomes a little bit easier to remember them because you've had some practical experience with them. If you're someone who doesn't have time to set up a lab, you don't even know what lab exercises to put together, this is something that might help you then. This is the GTS Learning Live Practice Labs from my friends at GTS Learning. This is something that I've used to create videos on my Network Plus course and other courses that I use, and it's something that has all the labs set up and ready to go for you. The labs include also the GTS Learning book. They include some sample questions. They bundle everything together with these labs. You can find out about these at professormesser.com/netlabs. They are online, always available. You run them from your browser. It's a full virtual environment, so it's not a simulation or an emulation of Windows. You're really setting up Windows, which is kind of nice to have that happen. And you don't have to worry about installing additional software or worrying about installing a virus or where did this come from. It's all in your existing browser. You don't need extensions. You need nothing. You just connect to the website. It takes it from there. It does everything from that perspective. There is also special pricing on this, and you only get the special pricing if you follow this link, professormesser.com/netlabs. That will get you to the GTS Learning Live Labs, and it will show you the discounted link of $109. Usually this is $169. That includes the GTS Learning book, all those sample questions they have for Network Plus, and the labs themselves. You can find out all about that at professormesser.com/netlabs. I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for their support of the Network Plus study group. Let's do another question. Let's jump to this one. Here's one that talks about Travel, maybe. Talks about going on a trip. What's this talking about? In which of these would you be most likely to find an 802.1q trunk? Well, where would I most likely find an 802.1q trunk? Would it be in a NAS server? Would it be a connection between switches? Would it be an authentication server? Would it be a connection between WAN sites? Or would it be a wireless access point? Which one of those would you be most likely to find an 802.1q trunk? This is definitely one of those questions where it could be more than one answer. But you have to read the question that says, which of these would be most likely to find an 802.1q trunk? I don't want multiple answers here. I'm looking for one answer. And maybe it's an answer that you know. If you know the answer, you can go to Socrative.com, click the student login, and go to room name Professor Messer. That might be useful. Yeah, it's not a tree question and it's not a travel question. That's one where we do have to know this 802.1q trunk and being able to work through it. Maybe you know. Maybe you've worked with 802.1q trunks and you know about the 802.1q trunk. I've said 802.1q trunk too many times. I think many of you know this one. Let's take a guess at how we did. Do you think most people, do we have this? Is this a gimme? I have to wonder. So I haven't looked yet at how we did with this one. NAS server, connection between switches, authentication server, connection between WAN sites, or wireless access point. How do we do? Well, at least we have a majority. 63% of us say that it's a connection between switches, but a very healthy 17% say it's a connection between WAN sites. 13% say it's a wireless access point is where we would use this. And only single digits, 5% said an authentication server and 3% said a NAS server. So which would it be? Where would we use 802.1q trunks? Indeed, where would we use this? This is one of the challenges we have when we start putting a lot of different VLANs on these switches that we create. We usually will create a VLAN to separate broadcast domains. We talked earlier about a broadcast storm. One way you can minimize the number of broadcasts on a network is to minimize the number of users. And one way to minimize the number of users is to create multiple VLANs and spread your users out across all of those different VLANs. One of the challenges, though, is that now we have all of these people on all of these different VLANs. They're geographically separated in the building or the campus or wherever we are, and all of these VLANs are on all of these switches. So how do we connect VLANs between switches? Well, one way we can do it is I have two VLANs here. I have the VLAN 100 and VLAN 200. It's a red VLAN and a blue VLAN. So one of the things I can do is certainly to connect up the VLANs themselves between switches by using individual cables. So I can extend the red VLAN between both of those switches by connecting the red VLANs together with one cable, and then I can get another cable and extend the blue VLAN 200 between those switches with another cable. But now I've got two cables there. And part of the challenge, of course, is imagine if it wasn't just two VLANs, maybe it was 100 VLANs. So how would I extend 100 VLANs between multiple switches? I certainly couldn't do it with single cables on there. So one of the things that you can do is to have not 100 connections, not even two connections, have a single connection between the switches. And what we do is make that connection a trunked connection. That trunk connection will be able to effectively put a tag into the frame that it's sending between the switches that says, everything that's in this particular frame is VLAN 100, and it sends it on its way. And on the other side, the other end of the trunk looks at what's coming through and goes, oh, well, there's a tag on this one. Oh, it's VLAN 100. Let me rip the tag off and stick this information onto VLAN 100 on this switch. So it's able to go back and forth quite nicely by using this trunk connectivity. So you can have a lot of VLANs. You can have 100 VLANs. You can have 1,000 VLANs between these switches in a single connection that's able to send traffic between all of those VLANs between these multiple switches. So it becomes handy to have that trunking functionality. We really would not be able to perform the type of networking we do today if we didn't have these .1q trunks, Becomes pretty important to have that. So if you did answer, the 62% of you, those are the ones that got it right. We can go with the largest number here. Connection between switches is where you would most likely find an 802.1q trunk. There are other places, of course, you could set up a trunk connected to a NAS server. Maybe you wanted to have the NAS server directly connected to certain VLANs. It's common to see those on those, but that's not where you would normally see it. You don't most likely see that on a NAS server. You don't commonly see it on an authentication server either. And certainly a wireless access point could be set up in a trunk connection, but again, you don't commonly see it used that way. Connection between WAN sites, we rarely extend a trunk across to a WAN site. Usually a WAN site is not something we would use a trunk in that way. You could, but again, it's not the most likely use of a .1q trunk. So this is a very good example where almost every answer could technically be used to have a 802.1q trunk connected to that device. But it's most commonly used, most likely used as a connection between switches. 61% of you got that one absolutely correct for that. Comes in handy. You will use trunking all the time. When you start administering switches, connecting many different switches together, having, especially in the core of your network, trunking communication becomes very important. It almost becomes pretty confusing at times. You have to really understand and document where your trunks are, who's on that trunk, what it refers to, something you definitely are going to use a lot if you get into network administration and network management. Let's do another question. I've got one available here that you might know or you might not know. Let's try this one. Which of these locations would be most likely to have a man trap? Which of these locations would be most likely to have a man trap? Would it be an MDF door? Would it be a bank entrance? Would it be a grocery store checkout line? Would it be a restaurant kitchen door? Or would it be a subway turnstile? Which of these would be the most likely place that you would find a man trap? Maybe you've been in a man trap before and you happen to know what this is. This is one that comes very handy. Whenever you need a man trap, it's good that you have one there. This is also an important topic from the Network Plus certification exam objectives. Make sure you always have the latest objectives and being able to use it. Which one of these would be the most likely place to have a man trap? Maybe you know. I'm going to take a little peek on my side and see if you folks know where you'd find a man trap. It comes in handy. This is one also that as you start getting into more with IT and more technology with the Network Plus, with the A Plus, with the Security Plus, you start to see some of these other uses for technology. This would be a good example of where technology in the real world sort of comes together in a very interesting way to have that there. Very useful to have that. So let's see how we did. I think most of you have answered this one. You've done a pretty good job. How do we do? Well, it's 44%, 43% is our winner set of bank entrance. 36%, 35% said an MDF door. That would be a good second place. And a good third place would be a subway turnstile, would be 21%. Only 1% said a grocery store checkout line, and nobody said a restaurant kitchen door. So the real question here, being able to figure this out, is what would be the most likely place to have a man trap? Let's talk about what a man trap really is. This is an entryway or an exit way into a particular area, and it's one that has doors on both sides. So you would have a door as you went in. There would be a room or a container. Sometimes it's a very large room. Sometimes it's a very small room. Sometimes it's a closet with a window. Sometimes it's a very small enclosed area. Just depends on the type of environment that you're working here. This is one where when you have one of the doors open, the other door won't open. In fact, it usually works that you have to have both doors closed before another one of those doors will open up again. So it really does mean that you have to step into the man trap. The door has to close behind you, and only then could you possibly be allowed through the second door. So there's always 2 doors associated with these man traps. We don't have 2 doors in this picture, but you can imagine the other end of this room is another door, and that would make it a man trap. Both of the doors commonly, when you run across these with IT anyway, both of the doors are normally locked. So you would first authenticate or get access to the first door. Maybe someone will buzz you in. Maybe you have an access card that lets you into the man trap. But that's kind of something that becomes important to be able to work through there. It is, it's one of those, whenever I start looking at these larger environments, becomes incredibly important, because you may be protecting some very important information on the other side of this man trap, and you want to be sure that the people you're letting in are really allowed to be there. It's a place where you can pause, you can check someone's identification, you can make sure that they have everything with them that you would expect to have. They're not bringing something in you would not be expecting. Maybe you're controlling a person at a time, maybe you're controlling a group at a time, but it's a very important part of security for our networks. If you're going to a very large data center, you will always be walking through a man trap, especially if it's a third-party data center, which is very common these days. You're walking into an area where there's a lot of security and a lot of control. So they want to be sure that you walk into a room, that you can present some authentication, that you have identification. They can assign a badge to you so that you're allowed through, and only then do they open up the other door and let you through. Becomes pretty important to do that. Sometimes it only allows one person at a time. Sometimes it allows as many people as they would like. Just depends on the environment you're working with. But now let's go back to look at what our possible answers were. So we have 44% of us said a bank entrance. That is not commonly where you would find a man trap. Bank entrances are there to allow you access to the bank. Sometimes there are multiple doors when you walk into a bank or into a shopping center or to a grocery store, but usually that's to prevent airflow. It's to not allow any of the air-conditioned air out of the bank. It's not to prevent somebody or lock somebody into a particular area. So bank entrance, not a common place for a man trap. Subway turnstile, 21% of you said subway turnstile was another good example. A subway turnstile only prevents you from getting from one side of that turnstile to the other. It's not trapping you on either side. You have complete access on one side of the turnstile and complete access in the other. A man trap lets you in, and then you have to go through another door to get out of the man trap. And that's definitely not a subway turnstile. Subway turnstile is just something keeping you from complete access until you've paid your fare. Obviously, nobody was fooled by a grocery store checkout line or a restaurant kitchen door. That is not where you'd see a man trap. But in your MDF, your main distribution frame, is commonly your data center. It's commonly the core of your network. It's commonly one of the most important parts of your network. So whenever you talk about the most likely place for a man trap, because again, people are saying in the chat room, no, my bank has one of these, or my Subway does a thing like this. Well, that's not the most likely use of it. The question was, which of these locations would be most likely to have a man trap? And the most likely answer here would be an MDF door. In fact, it's one of the most common places that you would find a man trap is through an MDF door. And it's a topic you absolutely need to know for your Security Plus certification. Comes in really handy to know this. So if you answered A, 34% of you, MDF door, that's actually the correct answer. That's the one that you need to talk about. So it's one where I think whenever we talk about these questions and being able to figure them out, that's what we need to know. Well, where am I getting all these questions from? The chat room people are even saying, where would I find man trap? Where'd you even come up with that? Well, I came up with it from the exam objectives. If you do not have the exam objectives for Network Plus, you need to stop everything you're doing and you need to download the exam objectives. This becomes incredibly important for you to have. The Network Plus exam objectives will list out everything you could ever possibly need to know for the exam. So this is where you would go when people come to me and say, how do I know what to study for my Network Plus exam? CompTIA tells you everything you need to study for your CompTIA Network Plus exam, to the point that they're giving you detailed explanations of different topics and everything you need to know. I've got the exam objectives in front of me, in fact, Here we go. I've got the latest ones. So when you start looking through them here, for instance, section 1.5, install and properly terminate various cable types and connectors using appropriate tools. And the different options are copper connectors. I need to know RJ11, RJ45, RJ48C, DB9, RS232, DB25, UTP coupler, BNC coupler, BNC, F connector, 110 block, and 66 block. So those are the copper connectors. You don't need to know any more copper connectors than that. You certainly need to know all of these copper connectors. So that's pretty important. The copper cables, shielded versus unshielded, Cat3, Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a, PVC versus plenum, RG59, RG6, and they're all in here. So that's section 1.5. You'll notice, by the way, that my videos are numbered to match those numbers. So if you're looking through this and trying to figure out where is that particular topic coming from, it's in the exam objectives. You can find all of those on the CompTIA website. This is also, of course, where you would go to download any of the exam objectives. For example, section 3.4, compare and contrast physical security controls, and there's man traps right there. So it's very easy to search through this list as well and find exactly what you're looking for. This should also be your last checklist whenever you go through this, to be able to find or understand, do I know everything? Am I ready to take the exam? If you can check off everything that's in this exam objective, you're ready to take your exam. It is one of the best ways that you could really do a self-evaluation to determine exactly what's going on with all of these pieces. Well, if you've been watching this study group, maybe on a replay, and you're wondering, when's the next one of these going to be? For Network Plus, our next study group is going to be on April the 12th, 2017. If this is nowhere near April the 12th, 2017, and you can go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you can see exactly when the next study groups are going to be. The next study group that I do is actually next week. My Security Plus study group is next week. For those of you in the United States, this is when we have our daylight saving time. So we convert over on Sunday for most of the United States. So one of the best things you can do to figure out what time does this really happen, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, and I have a a time conversion chart there. So you can figure out what's the local time for Professor Messer, what's the local time for me, and you can match all of those things up. I'll be in a complete messed up place next week because of the time change. So maybe that would be the best one to watch from a Security Plus study group, which will be next Wednesday at exactly this time, except on daylight saving time. So that's your caveat that I'll throw into the mix and making that happen. Well, we've gotten through an hour of the study group. Of course, stick around for the second hour. We have the after show where we talk about whatever. It's a completely open topic where we can discuss any of those different topics. But of course, you can follow what we do throughout the week and the month at professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/YouTube, professormesser.com/Facebook, professormesser.com/Instagram. Just type in professormesser.com/ and the particular social media you'd like me to find me on. And if I'm not on there, send me a note and say, why aren't you on this particular place? I'll get there. Be an easy way to do that. Don't forget about the Network Plus course notes for the NPCN, professormesser.com/NPCN for the course notes. My thanks again to the folks at GTS Learning and their support of the study group, at professormesser.com/netlabs for their special price. And again, you can follow us and watch any of our live events, not only live so you can participate with the Q&A, but replays, of course, are available immediately after and are archived on the Professor Messer website. Thanks for sticking around for this hour of Q&A. Maybe you'll join us for the next one. Stick around for the second hour of the after show. If you have to leave, I can understand that too, but we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone. All right. Do late arrivals still get the CEUs? You get the CEUs if you know how to ask for the CEU, which I talk about during the presentation. So if you missed that, then there you go. That's how that works. You did not miss the first hour. Oh, you did miss the first 30 minutes. Probably so, because we started an hour ago with all of those pieces. So sorry with that piece of it. Let's get the phone lines open. Get this going. I'm, of course, the only one here. So you're going to see me fumbling around to get the show going. Let's host this show. Get this going. I'm going to start this show up. And we're going to call into the show with these phone lines. Let's get this up on the screen so you can at least, I've not called in yet, but you can call in. We'll talk about our phone lines in a moment. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, it's not on.
Call screener line.
Yes, I know. And there's the thing. So I need to do this. Beep.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Uh-huh. And I'll put that in.
Welcome.
Welcome. There we go. So now we got the phone line up and running. I see some of you are already calling in. We'll be over to that in just a moment. So there's the phone line. If you'd like to call in, you can call in on our open phone lines at 855-785-7545. You can also call in through Skype, absolutely free, no Skype minutes required, free Skype at +1 855-785-RJ45. That's 785-7545 for that piece of it. And you'll be able to call in. I'm also looking at questions from the chat room as well. It's the live event chat. If you're here live, we can certainly talk about those as well to have that. It becomes handy to have that. Let's go, since people are on the phone, probably pot this up a little bit and go straight to the phones because we have area code 252 calling in. Hi, caller. What's your name?
My name's Eddie.
Hey, Eddie. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I was curious on, say if I was going to set up a wireless network in an office and maybe some other buildings close by that office. I know you'd need to set up like a directional antenna and some omnidirectional antennas.
Probably so.
How would this actually work? How would this work as far as channels and maybe what kind of antennas or what channels to use? So I know you use 1, 6, and 11.
1, 6, and 11 certainly on that on the 2.4 gigahertz, usually 802.11b, but of course we have other options available. And it's actually fewer options available depending on the frequency and the other types that we're using for wireless. That comes up pretty handy. The way most people are doing it from between buildings is you aren't extending a wireless network from maybe a conference room between a building to another conference room and having that as a single wireless network, but instead using a wireless connection over a long distance as kind of a bridge between the two. You're effectively creating a single network through that let's say between buildings. And a lot of people will use a directional antenna for that. They'll use one that they can really focus that signal and get it from point to point. The channels that you use should simply be channels that no one else is using. The frequencies that are in use are pretty important. Usually if you're setting up a connection between buildings, usually someone is showing up. You've got a service provider. They're helping you mount the antennas on the roof. And usually they have the ability to look at an analyzer that will show them the frequency spectrum, the spectrum analyzer. And they're able to really see where are they seeing communication on other frequencies around this area, which is going to be your most important part. That's where you're going to get the interference and lose signal as it's getting from one place to the other because other devices on similar frequencies are creating interference for you. So you would usually, obviously between buildings, use the very directional antennas, a Yagi, some other type of directional antenna to make that happen. Or, and inside your building, that's usually where you'd use the omnidirectional. So you put it in the center of a floor. You try to get it out to as many people on the floor as possible. You would rarely use an omnidirectional antenna to connect buildings or long distances together because it just can't get the signal from one side to the other. You're losing signal on a side where nobody is listening. So that becomes pretty handy. That's at a very broad perspective, that's how you would set up the wireless network. There are, of course, nuances associated with it. Some people prefer using slower speeds over longer links because you can do it with less signal going back and forth. It also depends on your environment. If there's a lot of noise and a lot of frequencies, it becomes increasingly difficult to get that between those sites. I think that's really why most people just use cabled connections if at all possible. It's not always that way, but it certainly helps because you never know when somebody's going to come along with and just plug in an access point, and suddenly you're not able to communicate anymore. Nobody wants to be in that position.
Well, going back to the channels, I know I have 1, 6, and 11, for example. If I would go to like to configure the router or the access point, it would have like different numbers in there, like 2.6 or I think other numbers in there. How does that correspond to those numbers?
Well, the 1, 6, and 11 are for 2.4 gigahertz and for those 20 megahertz ranges that you would find in 802.11b and some of those ranges in 802.11g. But when you get into 802.11g and 802.11n and 802.11ac, you're using much larger sections of bandwidth. You're using 40 megahertz ranges in some examples of that, and you're not able to keep or avoid an overlap at channels 1, 6, 11. Plus, if you're at 5 gigahertz, those channels don't apply anyway. There's a whole nother set of channels up at a 5 gigahertz range. So the 1, 6, and 11 are very common to see when you're using 802.11b with those 20 megahertz channels, 20 megahertz ranges on the channels. But when you get into other versions, and I have this in my videos and my course notes, when you get into other types of networks like 802.11g and N and AC, there may be different channels and there may be different bandwidths that you're using. So it's not always going to be that. The key, though, regardless of what the channel numbers are, is to use a channel that's not going to overlap with anything else that's in your area. So find out what channels you have available to you on your device. You find out what bandwidth you're going to be using on that particular channel and that particular network type, and then see what other people are communicating on in your area and try to find one where you're going to avoid as much overlap as possible.
Okay. I got one more question for you.
Sure.
And this pertains to subnetting. Say if I had a CIDR number, and for example, I wanted to have like maybe 500 computers. What's a quick way to come up with that number?
You can't. If you just give me a single address and a CIDR block notation at the end, you give me 10.0.0.8 or 10.0.0.0/8. Now you have to subnet it further to have those number of pieces or number of devices on the network. So you have to have a starting point, and then you have to have an end point. Maybe you're asking me, what's the end point going to be if I have a starting point? One of the things I did recently, I created another video. I added it to my Network Plus list that's on my website, which is 7-second subnetting. It's the process that I use when I sit down for a certification exam, and the subnet itself, the subnetting process itself, has no math associated with it. It's just some tables that you would write out prior to starting your exam. So you spend the time normally that you would use to fill out your exam or read through your exam candidate agreement, but instead you write some tables down. I talk all about the tables. I write them out in this video. I show you exactly the tables that I use on my exam. And that way, if somebody asks, how can I know my the number of my network address? How can I know my broadcast address? How can I know the first available network address on that network and the last available host address on that network? How can I compute all of those in 7 seconds? And in the video, I show you exactly how I do that. So if you're looking for that, it's just look on YouTube or on my website for 7-second subnetting, and I show you exactly the process I go through to get that.
Okay. All right.
Maybe that'll help you too. I can't think during an exam, so that helps me.
Okay. And you mentioned the objectives. How does those numbers correspond to a book?
Most of the time, a book will have right at the beginning of a chapter will list out, this chapter covers these sections of the CompTIA exam objectives. Sometimes there's also an appendix in the back of the book that says, here's the exam objectives and here's what chapters are associated with those. So usually there's a couple of places you can go in a book, and they're almost always going to be in your book. If your book doesn't reference the exam objectives, it's a bad book. And quite honestly, I've yet to find a book that doesn't do that.
All right.
Well, great, Eddie. Thanks for calling. Good luck.
Thanks for taking my call.
Take care. There's a lot to know. A lot of the objectives. Let's keep going to the phone lines. Area code 810. Hi, caller. Are you there? What's your name?
Hello, this is Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, what can we do for you?
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind.
All right.
The first question, you mentioned before about the certifications being serious and really useful, but I've gone to several businesses and IT firms over the past few years, and they don't take them as seriously, maybe. Maybe I'm not going to the right places, but they don't generally take them seriously. I've also had a manager rant at me because he thinks that just because you have a certification, you know it all. So I'm not sure, like, how would you respond to these types of situations?
The value of a certification is based on what you do with it. That's it. There is no other value intrinsic to a certification other than what you get out of having that certification. And I've mentioned this particular instance on other study groups as well, is that some organizations look at certifications very highly. They understand the value of having a certification. They know what you had to go through to get the certification. And that becomes pretty useful to have that knowledge, at least in your brain. They know what you've learned. A lot of people say all the time, very similar to what you had just said there at the end, that just because you have a certification doesn't mean you know everything. It's a bit of a straw man because nobody's ever said that if you have a certification, you know everything. I'm not sure where that got made up from. No one in the world has ever said, now that you are certified, you know everything. What the certification does for a lot of employers is prove that you can be taught and prove that you have a basic knowledge of what is being presented during that certification. Some employers really respect that and understand the nuances of how that can help them as an employer, and they take that into account. There are some employers that don't care about certifications. They will hire people without certifications, and their concept, their idea behind it is that they want to be able to train you. In fact, they're maybe thinking, I can hire people less expensively if they don't have a certification. It's a cost-effective business model for us. It's a strategy for us to hire uneducated people and do on-the-job training so I don't have to pay them as much. It's not like that's a bad or better than any other scenario than maybe a company that does like certifications. It's just the way that they like to look at it. Not everybody's going to understand the certifications. Not everybody's going to respect them. Not everybody's going to even care that you have them. But that's not why you got the certification. You didn't get it for those people. You got it for the other folks. And really, you got it for yourself. I know that when I go through a certification and go through the study process, I really have a much better understanding of the material that I've learned. And ultimately, that's what's going to help me as I go through my years in my career to learn more about what I'm doing. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
That does help me. Thank you. My other question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I haven't really looked at a lot of news about IPv4 and IPv6, but last time I remember there was an issue of like running out of addresses.
Sure.
Is that still an issue?
It's still an issue. In fact, there are, I think in the United States, the organization that provides the addresses for North America, I think, is completely out. There's other organizations throughout the world that handles IP address registrations in other parts of the world, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia Pacific. So in the United States, we ran out a long time ago. We don't have any more IP4 addresses to register with and to use. Everybody has gotten them, and we're starting now just to kind of use them up and do different things with them. So it's absolutely a concern. It's not the only reason we would want to move to IPv6, but it's certainly one that's driving a lot of us to use IPv6 because we are running out of IPv4, and this will be one very easy way to avoid any type of constraints associated with that.
All right. Well, thank you a lot. Thanks for answering my questions.
Thanks for calling, Andrew. Boy, IPv6 just it's one of those things that it's a jumping block. If you're doing anything in networking past Network Plus, you're going to be doing a lot of IPv6. I'll say it that way. You're going to be routing with it. You're going to be addressing with it. You're going to be using IPv6. Absolutely no question. 719 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? 719. You were holding for a while. I
Hello?
apologize. Hey, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Ricky.
Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hi, so I am currently studying for my Network Plus, and I'm taking a practice test, and I was wondering if you could help me understand as to why one of the answers is the answer that it is.
I love these because very often these are from other sites and they are just completely off the mark. And we're all stumbling around trying to figure this out. So don't give me word for word, but kind of give me the broad idea of what we're trying to do with this question.
Okay, well, essentially I'm trying to find the IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS server that a certain network setup is using.
Okay.
And the information I'm given is I'm given a picture of what the setup is. So I have workstation 1, then I have router A, which is the default gateway, 192.168.12.34/28.
Right.
And then it gives me an ISP, which is 168.1.11.199.70.7/22, and then the DNS, which is 198.162.1.22.
So they've kind of laid out for you a network diagram and kind of pointed out some of these IP addresses and working with them. One of the things I do immediately when I get these, by the way, is I look at my internal network that they're referring to, and it's effectively a subnetting question. You now have to figure out, based on, for instance, the router. You gave me a router IP address and a subnet mask. What is the what's the network address? What is the broadcast address? What is the first available host address on that subnet? What is the last available host on that subnet? And I have to calculate it. This is one that becomes a little bit of a challenge when you're working through these, because now you have to be able to do that subnetting very, very quickly. That's one, whenever I mentioned earlier my 7-second subnetting and being able to work through it, that's what I would recommend to you as well. Go find that 7-second subnetting, or go find the method of subnetting that allows you to calculate those 4 things very, very quickly. It doesn't have to be my 7-second subnetting process. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube that step you through this, but here's where you're going to want to focus. You want to be able to calculate very, very quickly what is my network address, what is my broadcast address, what is the first available host, and what is the last available host on a subnet. If you can do that very, very quickly, you will be able to answer those questions very easily. So that's the thing. I always tell people when they're subnetting what they want to do. I'll also tell you that from a subnetting perspective on the Network Plus exam, if you look at the exam objectives, it is a part of a section that's within a domain that's part of a bunch of other domains. You might get one subnetting question on the A+ exam or Network Plus exam. You might get two questions about subnetting on the Network Plus exam. You might get no questions about, this has happened. People said, I got no questions about subnetting on my exam. So a thing I like to tell people is subnetting is big, it's broad, it's scary to a lot of people, there's math involved, and it is something you have to sit down and really spend a lot of time understanding, and a lot of people still don't get it. But what I tell people is, don't worry about that so much. Learn everything else on the exam, and then come back to subnetting as your last thing. Even if you don't get subnetting 100%, you might not even get a question about it on your exam. So the difference between passing or failing is rarely going to be because you either got a subnetting question right or wrong. Usually it's something else going. It's more questions that you got wrong than just subnetting. Will you need to know subnetting if you do higher level certification exams? Absolutely. And those 4 things I mentioned, the network address, broadcast address, first and last available host, those are the things you have to be able to calculate very, very, very quickly. So whether you do it for the Network Plus exam or you do it for another exam, that's where I would recommend that you focus your efforts in general and for this specific question as well.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing is, I completely understand what the default gateway, DNS, and subnet mask, I understand what those are and was able to do that. The only one I had issue with was the IP address. Now, I'm having a hard time finding information as to what the calculation is, and I'm definitely probably going to go look at the 7-second subnet mask video that you mentioned. But what is that calculation called, or what is the calculation in general?
At the most
'Cause I haven't
basic
been able to
level,
find it very easily.
I do this in I have two subnetting videos for Network Plus. The one I created originally was actually performing the manual calculation of this. And the way this performed manually is you convert everything to binary, you perform the binary calculation, and then you convert it back to decimal. That's really what's happening behind the scenes whenever you're dealing with IP addresses and subnet masks. It's all being calculated through binary. So if you really wanted to understand what's happening at a basic level, and I recommend everybody do this, step through what it takes to perform that calculation so you know what's happening. On an exam, you don't have the time to be able to convert everything to binary and convert it back to decimal. You just don't have the ability. That's why a lot of videos you watch will show you shortcuts. They'll tell you use the powers of 2 and write down these particular values and have those. Everybody has their own way of doing that, but it's exactly the same math as my 7-second subnetting video and every other subnetting video out there. It's not like somebody has a secret of how to do it that nobody else is doing. We're all performing the same math. You just have to find the way to perform it that fits best for you.
Okay, great. And then that'll give me the IP address range, correct? Because that's where I'm confused at.
That's exactly it. Because if they give you the router's address, sorry, go ahead.
No. Because I was going to say is like it's like a multiple choice question, and even if I get it wrong, it explains to me as to why it's wrong. And even with the explanation, I wasn't fully understanding
right.
why it was like that range.
That's your key. If you can get one address from that subnet, you can use that address to calculate network address, broadcast address, and first and last host, and that I think will be the key for you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks for calling. That's subnetting. You can get wrapped around the axle really quickly with subnetting. Don't let that happen to you. Hey, caller, thanks for holding so long. 773 area code. What's your name?
My name is Benson.
Hey, Benson. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah. How are you? How you doing?
Hey,
thank
good.
you. I'm going to thank you for the good job you've been doing. May God bless you for that.
Thank you, sir.
And then I'm trying to find out how we're going to get the course note, print course note book.
My Network Plus course notes are available currently in electronic form only. They are not currently available in a printed form. And so for some of you that watched last week, you know that I have a book now for my A+ course notes because it's like 50 pages long. My Network Plus course notes, I don't have a book for it yet. I am planning on it, but it's one of those things that there's a list, and I'm going through the list as fast as I can. And that's when I absolutely want to create a book for that. I already have the printer is ready to print it. They've got a format that they can put it in. They've got a binding format that allows me to do a small number of pages, which the Network Plus course notes happens to be. It's like 20 pages or so. It's ready to go. I just have to format it properly for that, and I just have it. So to answer your question, I don't have one for you at the moment, but I'm working on it.
Okay. What about the one you showed us last week? I think it's not last week. Is it for the A+?
It is. The one last week I showed was the A+ course notes book. I don't have it here in front of me, or I'd be able to show it again. But it's one that's a bound book. It's printed. It's shipped to you. It's a normal book, but it's only available for the A+ exam currently. And I want to have one for both Network Plus and for Security Plus. I'm working on both of those.
Okay. How can I get one of those anyway? I think I might need that too.
Well, for the A+, it's available on my website. For Network Plus and Security Plus, I don't know how long it's going to be. It's going to be a bit of time before I'm able to get those printed and get it ready to go. But it's one that I hope to have certainly within the next few months.
Okay. I went to your site and looked for it. I couldn't find it. I don't know. So I wanted to buy one of that.
If you go to the A+, well, all of my course notes and everything are available on my website. In any of the pull-down menus for A+, for Network Plus, and Security Plus on my website, there are options available for, show you that on my screen. Here's all the chats up and running on my screen. On all of these, there are study recommendations. For CompTIA A+, there are A+ study recommendations. For Network Plus, there's Network Plus study recommendations. For Security Plus, there's Security Plus study recommendations, and the links to all of those are on there. I also have links that are under the larger objectives on my page for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. There are study groups, get the course notes, get the Network Plus course notes, get the Security Plus course notes. That will take you to the links as well. So either one of those will be able to help you find exactly what you're looking for.
Okay. Thanks much.
Thanks for calling, Vincent.
No.
I know there's a lot on my website. I'm trying to find a way to consolidate it down so you can find things a little bit easier. I keep moving things to hopefully make it a little bit easier, like consolidating everything into those little study areas. Hopefully that will work a little better as well to have that there. There's more calls. Thanks for holding, callers. There's been somebody who's been holding for a while. I'm coming to you next at the 540 area code. But first, I'm being a little stingy and making it a little bit cooler in here because it's hot. Let's make this happen right now. There we go. It didn't think anybody was in here because I haven't been moving around. I'm hidden behind all of my over here on that part of the room is all covered up, so it doesn't think anyone's in here. So it said, "Why should I cool this?" Well, because I'm sitting in here. Let's go to the 540 area code. Are you there, caller?
Hey, how you doing? This is Eric.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for holding
Stafford,
so
Virginia.
long. What can we do for you?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's cool. I had just a couple questions. My first one was about certifications themselves and regarding like applying with them. Like say with the resume, I was curious if you should list the facility at which you tested at under that certification, so that they know where you studied at or know where you tested at.
It's not a bad idea. I think most employers, though, don't care so much about how you got it as much as you having it. That's why I tell people, a lot of people are studying for a certification and they feel like, or they ask the question, should I put on my resume or my CV that I'm currently working towards a certification? And I usually say no, because your employers don't really care about what could happen. They want to know what is. So they don't care how you got it. They just want to know that you got it. Unless there is something very particular and special about where you receive that has a connection to that employer, it probably is something unnecessary to put on a resume.
Right. Yeah, because right now I just have a 901, and I was still working towards a 902, and I was just curious if that would be a good idea to put down, like, say, the person view center where you got it from.
If there was a personal connection between the center you went to get the certification and the employer you're handing that resume to, and they say, "Oh, we send all of our people to that place," and there's a connection or something you can bring up, I would see that would make sense. I don't know how you would know that. It couldn't hurt, but I don't see how there's any. Most employers don't care where you sat down, because you can go to any testing center to take the exam. All they really care about is that you have it. You know, if you're in a different state, I'm in Florida. If I took this test when I was in California and the hiring manager is from California, maybe there's something we can at least talk about. But that's a long shot to hope you hit that particular one during a sit down or a phone call.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then my next question, dealing with networks, was about a network printer. See, I was curious about what you would recommend for setting. I have a network printer working now. What I was curious about is having it talk to Apple products too. Would it be needed to get Bonjour so that I can talk to Apple products?
Probably so. There is a specific protocol or method that a printer has to use to be able to print directly from an iOS device from Apple, and that's AirPrint. So you have to check your printer and see, does it support AirPrint? If it supports Bonjour in the printer, there may be a pretty good chance that it does, because that's one of the most important parts of this, is that the printer can advertise itself out to all of these iOS devices. And if that's the case, that maybe the only thing you have to do is enable Bonjour, and now all of your iOS devices can print to that printer. You'll see it as a print option. I have a number of printers here that I'm able to do that with. And I find that's pretty useful, especially if you use a tablet or a phone and you're wanting to print a lot of things. That does come in handy. Not all printers, of course, support AirPrint. So you want to be sure to check your printer configuration and make sure that it is able to support that as well. Most of the more common modern printers are able to do that, but you do find some older ones, and really even some modern printers as well that just don't. They have no idea how to do anything with AirPrint. So usually you have to go right to the manual and find out from the manufacturer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because in this house we have a mixture of different devices. I mean, I have my Windows, and so does my mom, but my sister mainly uses her iPad.
Sure.
iPad on her iPhone, and I thought it'd be a good project to figure out how to get it to talk to everything.
It's a great feature.
In the house.
I love using it because I thought there'd be never a time when I would ever want to print anything. And of course, as soon as I enabled it, I can think of all these other things that I can use to print now from my iOS devices. It really does come in handy.
Yeah, it's interesting because we having iOS for so long, we had iPhones for about 2 years now, and just recently we got new Android phones. So it's an interesting adjustment where we're adjusting to a different OS here.
Yeah, it's an enormous adjustment. That's not interesting. That's an enormous adjustment to go between those two. People think you just go get one or the other, and there's really no difference. No, there's a huge difference between these operating systems and being able to use them effectively. It does become second nature after a while, but that is a significant transition to get between one and the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good luck with the printing.
I was just wondering about.
Go ahead.
Just some other thing I was wondering about. I wonder if it's like a zany idea or two out there, but is it possible to build possibly your own router or build your own provider device that you yourself could be your own service provider?
It's not an unusual idea, and there are people that do similar things for, if you look at, for instance, apartment complexes. A lot of apartment complexes will get an internet connection from an ISP, and then effectively they're a service provider for everybody who's in their apartments. So they provide that service for the people that are there. Something that's commonly done. Now in a home type environment, if you're getting a cable modem connection and it's a not a business connection, it's a consumer home connection, you are contractually restricted from providing services to other people. You're not allowed to do that based on the contract that you have with the service provider that's bringing in that cable modem connection. So it does depend also on the legalities associated with that. Technically speaking, there's nothing that can stop you from doing that. You set up a router, you can NAT to these other networks, you run a cable, you run a wireless connection. It's something that's very, very commonly done.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you. I enjoyed the study group. It's funny because I'm just still working towards A+, but I enjoy sitting through the ones I don't really know that much about. Just participating, even though I'm still working towards them, but I don't know anything about them. And I think it's funny when I find the right answer. But
it's surprising how much overlap there really is, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, because of the man trap question. I remember reading about those, and I really enjoyed the concept of the man trap.
It's something that, unless you're stuck in one somewhere, it's something you may have never even thought about before. So great. I'm glad that's helping out. Thanks for calling, Eric.
Yeah, thank you much.
Let's go to the 226 area code. Are you there, caller? Thanks for holding for so long. What's your name?
Michael.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Got a question for you that might be outside of your area.
Oh, I'll take it.
Logging up air.
I missed what you said there. So say that again, because I think got cut off there on the speakerphone you've got.
Logging trap error.
Okay. So is this just something you're using syslog or SNMP to log traps? Is that specifically what you're referring to, or is this a shotgun trap?
As regarding Cisco CCNA.
Okay.
That's what I'm taking along with networking administration.
Okay. And
I've looked up, and I have not been able to find too much on it.
So this may be specifically in the CCNA under the logging section. They do spend a lot of time on the logging on the CCNA specifically, so that you can understand those. Most of the logging that's done there is on the syslog side. So you have to know how you would set up syslog and how you would send information from syslog into that logging, centralized logging place. Is that the concept, the idea you're running into?
Oh no, it's just the answer to a question. But turn around, when I got it wrong, I started trying to find information on it and couldn't find any information on it really.
So the one specifically is the
little small bits.
The logging trap question specifically is what you're referring to, correct?
The answer was logging trap error. And
Okay.
I searched up and down, left, right, and center, and just couldn't find too much on it.
Well, on a Cisco router, it's really interesting, all of the different places that you can log to. You can log to the console.
Yep.
You can log to an SSH connection. They call it a terminal or monitor connection. You have buffer logs that are inside the iOS device itself. And there are syslog logs where you've got a separate set of drives that's off on another server, a syslog server, and you're taking all the logs that the switch or the router is creating, and you're shipping those off to hopefully a much larger hard drive somewhere to store logs over a very long, extended, in some cases a year or more, can be stored in those syslog devices. The challenge you run into, and you're going to find this if you do any type of logging on a network, is that there's a lot of logs these devices generate. They log an extensive amount of information, just a huge amount. And when you're sending this off to a syslog, you're probably logging not just one switch or router. There may be tens or even hundreds of devices that you're logging. And what you may find is that you don't really care if you get a message that's a notification, but you really do care if an actual warning happens. For instance, if you were to unplug an Ethernet cable out of your router, you get two messages. You get one that the protocol went down, and then you get one that the line went down. Well, maybe you don't care so much that the protocol went down, but you really do want to log permanently that the line went down. So you want to change the severity of the logging so that you're able to only log certain types of messages. Those different severity levels are numbered between 0 and 7, where 7 is debugging and 6 is informational. They're things that you hardly ever would want to log. And then there's severity level 0, which is an emergency level, where you definitely want to know if anything happens there at a very low number. If you have anything like a 1 or 2 or 3, you absolutely want to log that because there was a serious problem that occurred. And when you set these alarm levels in an iOS device, in a Cisco device, you set them by using, for syslog, logging trap, and then the number of the severity level that's the minimum of, or the maximum of what you want. So if you set it to be a logging trap 3, it corresponds to a level that is just error conditions and only sends errors. It doesn't send warnings or notifications or anything that's not as important as that. It will send errors and critical and alerts and emergencies. Not only do you specify that at the command line by using numbers like logging trap 3, but you could also, instead of using the number, use the actual keyword name of the layer. So logging trap errors is the same thing as logging trap 3. It means log everything that's an error and more important than that. So a lot of people don't use the names, because you could do logging trap warnings, logging trap notifications, logging trap informational, logging trap debugging. You can use the actual name instead of the number. Most of the time we see it written as numbers, but you could actually put the name in there if you wanted to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for
coming.
coming.
You answered all the questions I needed, sir.
Good luck with your CCNA.
Have a good day. Great shows.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We've got more people holding on there, going through that. Let's have a look at the 580 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? 580. I know you're holding for a while.
Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for holding.
Yes, sir. Two questions. One is, so I'm still in class right now myself. Awaiting a job offer. I still have a few more classes and things of that nature to take.
Great.
And I understand that in the industry, it's okay to kind of move around, but I'm not sure exactly what I want to do yet in the IT field. I do know that I hate servers. I'm in server class right now, and I hate servers.
That's good. Okay.
That I will not be doing.
Excellent. So,
but just any advice on what to look for, so I can start, I guess, really directing my path on what it is that I want to do.
My perspective is one where IT is just so broad. There are so many things you could be doing with technology. It could be programming on the computer science side, but if we talk just about IT, you've got servers. We don't want to do servers, but that's a huge chunk of things you could do with IT. It could be database administration. There's database servers. There's a whole world associated with database servers. There's networking, certainly an incredibly large world focus on networking and routing and communications. There's another whole section on security. There's another one on, you can just keep going with the different data centers. There's a data center management piece. There's so many different aspects to IT. And one of the things that I've always liked about information technology is I could focus on just one of those things, and I wouldn't even have to know anything about the other stuff, technically, and still be able to do what I liked to do. For me, whenever I started getting into IT, I started on workstations and setting up Windows and getting Windows to work across the network. But I really found that networking was really, really interesting for me. So I kind of moved away from servers and workstations, and I started spending more time with networking. And I could really do networking and understanding the protocols and setting up the switches and setting up the routers and doing the wide area networking. You could spend an entire career doing nothing but networking, and you wouldn't have to know anything about database management. You wouldn't have to know anything about data centers. You wouldn't necessarily have to know anything about workstations or servers, for that matter, or dealing with operating system patches or any of those other things. You could just do networking. In my case, the networking led into security, and ultimately a big chunk of what I spent my career on was networking. Another big chunk was on security. And what I tended to do was just find the thing that I liked doing. Because if you like doing it, you can spend a lot of time doing it. It won't really concern yourself as much. And you can, if you find a niche and learn everything you can know about that niche, you will be surprised how much more you know than anyone else you're working with. Usually, in fact, in places I've worked, there was always a problematic thing or always a thing that nobody knew anything about. And every place you walk into is going to have one of these. They will tell you, don't touch that machine over there. If that machine ever turns off, we're in big trouble because nobody knows what's going on in there. I always took that as a challenge. Like, nobody knows? I will find out what's going on in that machine. I will become the expert of what's going on inside of that machine. I will understand how to power it on, power it off, change configuration, make it talk, make it walk, make coffee for me. And as soon as I became that person who understood the mysterious box that was sitting in the corner, you've now got skills that help the organization. You also have learned a lot about the technologies you're using in your environment, and usually those technologies can be applied to other things as well. For me, I got very interested in protocol analyzers we were using. I wanted to learn everything I could about the protocol analyzer to the point that I went to work for the company that made the protocol analyzers. So you never know where this stuff's going to go. I had no idea that's where I was heading. I had no plans to do that. But I suddenly realized the people I was talking to at the protocol analyzer company were telling me, you know, you're really good at this. Have you thought of just doing this? And I thought, you mean I could just do this all day with this one thing that I really like? They said, well, of course, that's the way it works. And so I think that's something that everybody could do, is find that niche and drill down on it. If you don't like servers, that's fine. It was not my bag of tea either. I didn't like, not so much on the server side and the workstation side, but boy, networking, I gravitated. Security, I was right there. So you don't know where it's going to take you either. Whenever I started this journey, there really was no internet. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no live video streams online with YouTube. None of that stuff happened. So I had no idea 20 years ago that I'd be sitting here today. Just follow it. It will take you where you're going. Even if you don't know where that is, it will lead you in that direction.
Okay, yeah, I did kind of have a sense of going towards security, but I'll take your advice there and just kind of see where it goes. My next question is, I want to be able to set up my my router to where I can control what time my kids are able to use the internet.
Yes. But this is probably also going to affect how you use the internet too, is it not?
I was hoping not.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That's one of the challenges. One of the things that you will find is that most of the routers and devices, the home-based Soho type routers, many of them have a time on, time off functionality, but it's for the entire router. Like you don't even have a choice. This is how it's set up. A number of the newer ones, though, have multiple SSIDs, multiple wireless networks you can set up, and you can set up different time on, time off schedules for each one of those access points. Sometimes you have to get multiple access points to do that. There are some open source Soho wireless router operating systems that you can load on a number of devices that have additional functionality. It is not a simple or trivial thing to install that onto a wireless access point, but it might give you additional functionality. It's kind of neat to do if you're a technologist anyway, to do that kind of thing. But that might provide you with additional capabilities. Normally, though, you would have to find an access point or a wireless router that had that built in, that you could segment it out by different people, or at least by different networks. So you have a kids network that turns off at 9 o'clock at night, and a mom and dad network that stays on for 24 hours a day, and you can set up different security on both of those. So that may be what you have to look for.
But can I not just do it off of the MAC addresses on their devices?
It would make sense that you would be able to do that, but I've not seen any wireless routers that allowed me to set a schedule based on a MAC address. And if your kids are smart, obviously, they will learn how to spoof a MAC address too. So that may not be the best option for security. It might help for a little while anyway, but I've not seen a router that has, doesn't mean there isn't one out there that does that, but I've not seen one for the home that has that type of functionality. There's plenty of enterprise firewalls and enterprise wireless access points that do that kind of thing, but nothing I can think of for the home.
So I can purchase a firewall that would do it. That's what you're telling me?
You could. I think probably the cheapest way for the house, if I had to do it, I would just buy another access point. It would obviously run on different frequencies. They'd sit very close to each other, or be in the same room, or obviously in the same house. But this access point's for the kids, because it's very easy to find an access point that will just turn off at a certain time of the day. And there's another completely different wireless network that's daddy's wireless network, and it's on all the time, but it's got a password on it for the WPA2, and they can't get into that one.
Right.
So that may be the cheapest, most inexpensive way to do it. Anything else, Jonathan?
Well, I have no other questions at this moment.
Thanks for calling in. It. Good talking to you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
And we've got the 410 area code. Are you there, caller? Hi, thanks for calling. What can we do for you? Are you there, caller? I can hear you.
Hello, good morning.
Hey, how are you? What's your name?
Master, this is Gideon.
Hey, Gideon.
1 second. I'm going to call you back. I apologize. I was waiting for this call. Okay. Hello, Dr. Messer. How are you?
I'm so sorry to have you on hold for so long. What can we do for you?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was always, it certainly was worth it every single minute. Dr. Messer, I'm in the middle of getting my LPIC 1. hopefully to be ready soon for my first part of the LPIC-1 exam.
Sure.
Do you teach Linux? Are you involved with Linux?
I've done at one point. I was thinking of doing both of those Linux Plus exam versions, and I started down that road of starting to create Linux Plus videos. And I have a couple that I stuck out on YouTube, and they're still there. They're for the previous version of Linux, but there's not a lot. There's maybe 10 or 15, and quite honestly, for both of those, LPIC-1 and LPIC-2, they're probably 200 videos if I was to do the entire series. But it just did not get the type of response I was hoping for, and I ended up not continuing with those particular videos, unfortunately. Sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah, that's how I got to you, subscribed to your channel, because you did explain very well some of the Linux lessons, which I couldn't understand. Now, security, I know that Security Plus is now hot topic on the job market. Will be able to using my LPIC-1, which I'll pass, and the channel into the Security Plus?
Oh, I think absolutely. There are one of the things about the security market in general is it really focuses on really two big areas. One is networking. You have to have a very strong networking foundation to be in IT security. There's just so many networking hooks into it that it's important that you have that. The other one is operating systems, and one of the most common and important operating systems from a security perspective is Linux, and in some cases you could even say Unix. Mac OS certainly fits into that category as well, because those are the platforms we generally use to launch our security tools from. So having a very good knowledge of Linux almost immediately makes you knowledgeable in syslog, because most of the most common syslog servers are on Linux platforms. A lot of manufacturers for security put their security platforms on Linux, so it helps having knowledge of Linux to do that. Is it required for security? Not really required, but one of the things that you find when you get into IT security is if you have enough knowledge in networking and operating systems in general, it really helps overall with all of the security issues that you run into. Because if you know how Windows works, you can secure it better. If you know how Linux works, you can secure it better and certainly manage the platforms better that you'll be using for security.
Oh, that's great. So do I need to have LPIC-2 in order to get it secure, or after LPIC-1 I should be strong enough to go into Security Plus course?
I think you could do Security Plus technically without either of those, but I think having your Linux Plus is a nice certification to have. I don't think either of the Linux certification tests are necessarily a prerequisite for Security Plus. I think you could study for Security Plus and pass it without really having any Linux knowledge whatsoever. There's some basic command line stuff that's in security. Actually, there's not any command line stuff in Security Plus, so you really don't even have to have a massive operating system knowledge to pass Security Plus. You could take it without the Linux Plus or even just the LPIC-1 exam being under your belt.
Okay, got it. Do you know any good sources, just like yourself, that focus on the LPIC?
I don't. I spend so little time on the LPIC side that I really can't think of any offhand. I just haven't had any experience going through those. I looked at, whenever I was working through the videos, there were a couple of books that I worked through, but I don't even remember what those are. At this point, it's been such a long time since I've really done that.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Messer.
Good luck with all of those studies.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for taking my call.
That's a real challenge too, because if you've got, for security especially, the more you know about all of those different domains of IT, the better off it's going to be, because you're going to run into Windows updates. You're going to be dealing with Linux at the desktop. You're probably going to have Linux servers no matter what organization you go to. There is Linux in everybody's organization. And then you get into other operating systems, like you may not see Mac OS a lot, but now It's one that is getting more people using it in the enterprise. Now you have to secure even more of those things. A lot of security people carry around a Mac device because it's easy to use and it's BSD, Unix, effectively under the surface. So it's relatively secure when you compare it to perhaps a Windows operating system. So it's very common to see security people using that. It's one whenever I was working for a company that focused on enterprise security, and all of our engineers were walking around with Mac OS laptops. So it's just sort of a common thing. The more you know about those, the better you're going to be from a security perspective and using those. Let's go through a couple of the questions before we finish up. I know we've hit the top of the hour. There was a question that came up earlier. Maybe I don't have it here. It was near the beginning of the second half here. I'm going to flip through this real quick and see if that's there. I don't think I see it in that list. One of the ones that we were talking about broadcast storms. That's what it was. We were talking about broadcast storms near the end of the Q&A part of the study group. And the question that came up is it possible to use Wireshark to track broadcast storms to single out the individual causing the storm? And that's exactly what you do with Wireshark. It's giving you the MAC address, and broadcasts obviously don't go across a subnet. They don't cross routers. So you're able to very easily see all of the devices on your local subnet, and you know exactly what device in your local subnet is sending the most number of broadcasts. Wireshark even has a number of counters that you can have constantly rolling, so you don't have to look at the raw decode to try to figure this out. They can list out for you exactly how many people are doing what. So you can get a top 10 list of just broadcasts, and it tells you, here's my top 10. You'll know exactly what percentage of those top 10 are doing anything with those certifications. So that may be an idea, something you can use to think about what you could do to help find those broadcasts in your environment. Well, that finishes up our study group for another month. Can you believe we were able to make it through 2 hours again? I want to thank everybody for joining us. Remember, we have another study group next week, which is my Security Plus study group. Another reminder, on Sunday in most of the United States, our clock changes. We spring forward. We lose an hour. We move our clocks forward 1 hour at 2 in the morning on Sunday. So we will be at a different time relative to where you might be in the world. It will be at 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time next week. So make sure you check your time conversions and make sure you know exactly when that's going to be. And you'll find a nice time conversion on my calendar event page at professormesser.com/calendar. So I want to thank everybody for joining me on the Network Plus study group. Hopefully we'll see you next month on the next Network Plus study group. Maybe we'll see you next week for Security Plus. But either way, I want to thank you for joining us now, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group.